The 2018 NFL draft class single-handedly saved the NFL from a completely boring era. Before that draft, the NFL still belonged to the same guys who had owned it for nearly 2 decades. Tom Brady was already in his 40s, Drew Brees was closing in on 40 himself, other old dudes like Big Ben and Phillip Rivers were still playing as well. Nobody sitting in those draft rooms in April that year knew what was about to happen to the sport. Multiple players became MVPs along with an all-time running back and a generational offensive lineman just in the first round alone. However, what nobody talks about is how the league looked before this class and how close we were coming to a dead era. So let's set the scene for how things used to be. The NFL in 2017 was still a pocket passer league. Offenses were built around clean protection and precise footwork. Guys like Patrick Mahomes still hadn't become a full-time starter yet, and Carson Wentz along with Jared Goff, former high picks, didn't look like they were ready to take the torch just yet. Brady was the standard in his 40s, Brees was in his late 30s with a still precise arm. However, none of these guys are winning because they could run. Back then, the dual threat still wasn't mandatory in the league. Aaron Rodgers was the closest we got to a mobile elite QB, but even then, he was a rarity. Any quarterback who relied on his legs too much got labeled a gimmick, and people assumed he would get exposed the second a real NFL defense figured him out. The thing is, quarterback is the hardest position to find a long-term answer for, and in 2017, almost nobody really had one, at least no up-and-comers. Teams were stuck rotating veteran retreads and hoping for lightning in a bottle, so seeing 5 guys with legit first-round grades in the 2018 class was historically rare. But the problem was every one of these prospects still had question marks coming out. Evaluators weren't wrong to have questions, but a lot of these teams were in need of a QB, so many potential red flags were overlooked. And luckily for a few of these teams, those QBs would deliver for them specifically. The Cleveland Browns were on the clock with the first overall pick, and they decided to take Baker Mayfield out of Oklahoma. He was a former Heisman winner who had become a walk-on and then turned into the top player in the country. Cleveland had been a total mess for years at that point in time, and honestly not much has changed, but at that point in time, the front office believed Mayfield was a fire that would finally light a spark in that building, and for a time, they were right. At pick 3, the Jets grabbed Sam Darnold out of USC. He had the big arm and the mobility that scouts talked about that made him look like he was already a finished product. New York had been searching for a true franchise guy since the days of Broadway Joe Namath, and they were convinced Darnold was the answer to all their problems. Then things got interesting when we reached pick 7. Buffalo wanted Josh Allen so badly that they traded up to get him, and you could actually hear the tension on the broadcast. Josh had the strongest arm in the class by a mile, but his completion percentage at Wyoming was honestly ugly. Every analyst on the set kept bringing up the same word, which was accuracy. They wondered if he could actually hit an NFL target consistently, or if that massive arm strength would just go to waste on a player who couldn't put the ball where it needed to go. Buffalo was betting their entire future on a guy that half the room thought might bust out of the league. And now here's where the night really got strange. Josh Rosen was still sitting there despite having the cleanest mechanics and a prototype release. On paper, he was the most pro-ready resume of any quarterback in that entire class. Most people expected him to go in the top 5 or even challenge for maybe the number 1 spot, but instead, he watched picks 4 through 9 go by without hearing his name. Arizona finally took him at 10, which made it feel like nobody was fully sold on him yet even at that stage. The safest prospect in the room fell much further than anyone had anticipated. But that slide was nothing compared to what happened to Lamar Jackson. Lamar was a Heisman winner out of Louisville, and if you looked at his college production, he was clearly one of the most dynamic players in the draft. Even so, pick after pick went by and his name stayed off the board. 10 picks turned into 20, and the board stalled on him in a way that usually doesn't happen with the talent of his caliber. Everyone watching knew the league was hesitant because his game didn't look like the traditional prototype. He won with his legs more so than with his arm, and NFL teams still hadn't figured out how to value that style of play. The tension built all the way up to the final pick of the first round at number 32. Baltimore traded back into the first round to grab him right before the round closed out.
The Philadelphia Eagles have traded the 32nd pick to the Baltimore Ravens. In the 2018 NFL Draft, the Baltimore Ravens select Lamar Jackson.
And there were plenty of other studs that were drafted in the first round we'll be getting to soon as well, but first we'll start with the best 2 players from this class. Lamar started his rookie year on the bench behind Joe Flacco, and for the first 10 weeks, it kinda looked like he would just stay there for his rookie season. That all changed when Flacco got hurt, and Lamar stepped in to lead Baltimore to a 6-1 record down the stretch. He was definitely raw as a passer his rookie season, but the flashes of greatness were impossible to ignore. Defenders were constantly missing tackles in the open field because the angles that worked for every other quarterback just didn't work for him. Then 2019 arrived, and it wasn't just a flash of potential anymore. He completely took over the league by week 1 against the Dolphins. He finished the season throwing 36 touchdowns, which led the league, and rushed for over 1,200 yards, which broke the single-season rushing record for a quarterback that Michael Vick used to hold. Lamar won the MVP award unanimously at just 22 years old, which only happened one other time in the history of the NFL.
So congratulations to this year's most valuable player, Lamar Jackson.
The reason this worked is that Baltimore didn't try to force Jackson into a traditional mold. They built the entire offense around his specific skill set, and that meant going all in on the run-pass option. The RPO puts a defender in conflict on every single snap by forcing them to guess whether to stop the run or to cover the pass. Jackson punished the wrong guess every single time he saw it. Defensive coordinators who spent their whole careers planning for pocket passers suddenly had to figure out how to stop a guy who could run for 20 yards whenever he felt like it. Lamar won his second MVP in 2023.
23 AP Most Valuable Player presented by Invisalign is Lamar Jackson.
And this performance wasn't as convincing as the first one, but you could see the growth in his passing game, while he put up elite passing numbers to go along with his rushing production, on his way to becoming a 2-time MVP. The guy who was told he might need to switch positions to wide receiver proved that theory wrong twice over and became the best player in the league for those seasons.
The Buffalo Bills select Josh Allen, quarterback, Wyoming.
Josh Allen's story started in a much messier place than Lamar's did. His rookie year was a struggle where he threw more interceptions than touchdowns, and his completion percentage was near the bottom of the league. The boom or bust label that followed him out of Wyoming looked like it was going to be the story of his career. The scouts were right to worry about his ball placement, and his first few years in the league didn't give them many reasons to change their minds. However, Josh didn't stay the same player for long. His completion percentage climbed every single year while his turnovers finally started to drop, slightly. By 2020, he was a completely different passer who still ran like a big running back but could finally hit the throws he missed as a rookie. That improvement continued through the playoff heartbreaks and offensive coordinator changes until 2024, when he finally earned an MVP of his own. He did it by posting a career-low interception total in a Buffalo offense that was designed to let him do everything. When you put Jackson and Allen next to each other, it's insane what they've accomplished. Neither one of these guys fit the mold the league was obsessed with back in 2017. According to the old measuring sticks, neither one of them was supposed to work out. Instead, they both ended up holding the title for the best quarterback in football in multiple different seasons. While Lamar and Josh were busy changing the way we look at the position, two other passers from the same class were fighting a very different battle. They weren't worried about MVP votes or legacy, they were just trying to keep a job in the league. Baker, being the #1 overall pick, had the Browns handing him the keys to a franchise that hadn't won in decades, and for a while, it looked like he might actually be the guy.
With the first pick in the 2018 NFL Draft, the Cleveland Browns select Baker Mayfield. Quarterback, Oklahoma.
He set a rookie touchdown record, led a playoff win over Pittsburgh, and had the city believing again, and then it all fell apart. Cleveland soured on him after he played through a torn labrum and still couldn't carry them anywhere meaningful. They traded for Deshaun Watson and shipped Mayfield out like he was nothing. Carolina picked him up, started him 6 games, and cut him in December. The Rams grabbed him off waivers as an emergency starter, meaning he was on 3 teams in 1 calendar year. Nobody wanted Baker Mayfield as their franchise quarterback. Tampa signed him eventually for $4 million on a 1-year prove-it deal in 2023. They didn't even give him the full-time starter job until late August. He was competing against Kyle Trask for a job that nobody thought would matter. The whole situation was a reluctant resort and not a real commitment, but he thrived in Tampa. 2 division titles in his first 2 years, a 105.9 passer rating that ranks first among all active starters in that time. 15 game-winning drives since 2018, second to only Josh Allen in this class. Throwing for over 4,000 yards in back-to-back seasons before getting banged up this previous year. But not without completely turning around his career in the process. He's now in talks with the Bucs for another $100 million deal.
With the third pick in the 2018 NFL Draft, the New York Jets select Sam Darnold, quarterback, USC.
Sam Darnold started his NFL career by throwing a pick-6 on his very first pass as a pro, which is just a total nightmare that set a dark tone for 3 miserable years in New York. He dealt with injuries and got benched, but the low point came when he told his teammate he was seeing ghosts on the field. The Jets' offensive line couldn't block anyone, and that roster was a mess, so by the time the team moved on, most people in the league viewed him as a total bust. He wasn't a project anymore, but more of a warning sign for other teams, just like Josh Rosen, but with way more talent being thrown away. The next few years were a blur of different jerseys and backup roles. He spent 1 year in Carolina where nothing worked, then went to San Francisco to hold a clipboard, and eventually landed in Minnesota as a temporary starter. Nobody expected him to be the long-term answer there, but he wound up throwing over 4,000 yards and leading the Vikings back to the playoffs. He then parlayed that into a contract with Seattle, and everything finally clicked. He started playing consistently like the elite prospect scouts loved at USC before the New York disaster happened. It all led to a Super Bowl victory, and seeing Darnold stand on the field proved just how important the situation really is for young players. And same went for another former New Yorker. Saquon Barkley had a very different path than Darnold, but the underlying theme is exactly the same. After being drafted second overall, his rookie year with the Giants was incredible because he put up over 2,000 total yards and won Offensive Rookie of the Year. We all thought we were watching a generational talent who would dominate for a decade, and the truth is, he was that guy. The problem was that the Giants could never build a functional offensive line, so Barkley had to fight for every inch while his stats suffered. He had a few injury-riddled seasons, then an amazing bounce-back campaign in 2022, leading the Giants to their first playoff win since the 2011 season. However, the Giants still didn't want to commit to him, and after the 2023 season, he was out. Everything changed the moment he signed with Philadelphia, and that traffic finally cleared out. He was running behind one of the best offensive lines in the NFL, and the results were immediate. Saquon rushed for over 2,000 yards and broke records that had been on the books for decades, eventually leading that team to a Super Bowl win.
For the second time, the Vince Lombardi Trophy is headed to Philadelphia. Eagles fly in Super Bowl 59.
He was the exact same player he had always been, but the new environment allowed him to actually show it. Quarterbacks and running backs are the names that get the big headlines, but they're only about half the story for the 2018 class. The way rosters are built in the NFL today changed because of what happened in the rest of that first round. We have to start in the trenches with one of the best guards of this generation. Indianapolis took Quentin Nelson at number 6, and he didn't need any time to adjust to the pro game. He dominated defenders from his very first snap and earned first-team All-Pro honors as a rookie, which is almost impossible for a guard to do. And he's been on a fast track to Canton ever since. Detroit found their own anchor at pick 20 when they grabbed Frank Ragnow, and while it took him a little bit longer to get comfortable, he became the heart of their offensive line. Vita Vea on the other side of the line became the best run-stopping nose tackle in the league for the Bucks, helping them win a Super Bowl in 2020 and a steal at pick 12. Cleveland and Green Bay found elite value at the cornerback position. Denzel Ward went 4th overall to the Browns and immediately became a shutdown defender who could take away an opponent's best receiver. Jair Alexander landed with the Packers at pick 18 and put together the same kind of elite resume over the next few seasons, though it didn't last as long as Denzel Ward. Having a corner like them lets a defensive coordinator sleep better at night because they know one side of the field is completely locked down. There are also 2 stars who needed to be traded before the rest of the world realized just how good they actually were. Minka Fitzpatrick was drafted 11th by Miami, but the Dolphins traded him away after 1 season. He didn't become an all-pro safety until he got to Pittsburgh, where he started reading quarterbacks and turning every mistake into an interception. Roquan Smith had a similar experience after being drafted 8th by Chicago. He was a productive player for the Bears, but his game went to a completely different level once he joined the Ravens and became one of the most complete linebackers in football. Probably only second to someone else in this class we'll get to in the next section. Derwin James somehow fell all the way to pick 17, which looked like a massive mistake for so many other people that could have used him but passed up on him. Derwin is a rare athlete who can blitz off the edge, cover elite tight ends, and hit running backs like a linebacker. The Chargers ended up with a player who changed the way we really think about the safety position. Bradley Chubb went 5th to Denver to be their primary pass rusher, and he's been incredibly disruptive whenever he can stay healthy. Injuries have slowed him down more than anyone wanted, but the talent has always been obvious when he's on the field. This round was loaded with elite guards, corners, safeties, and edge rushers who became foundational pieces for their franchises. Even the teams that missed on a passer usually walked away with a Pro Bowl starter, besides the Cardinals with Josh Rosen, which is why front offices still talk about this 9 years later. The crazy thing is, the talent didn't stop once the first round was over. Some of the most productive players from this entire group were still sitting on the board during the 2nd and 3rd days of the draft. The 49ers found Fred Warner at pick 70 in the 3rd round, who became the best linebacker in football and has led them to 2 Super Bowl appearances so far in his career. Fred covers tight ends like he's a safety while reading run plays before the offensive line can even get out of their stance. He's already earned 4 All-Pro nods, and Robert Saleh has been calling him a Hall of Famer while he's still in his physical prime. You don't usually draft a linebacker that late and expect the best all-around player at the position within 5 years. But that's exactly what the 49ers walked away with. The Baltimore front office had already secured their quarterback at the end of the first round, but 2 rounds later they found his favorite target. Mark Andrews came out of Oklahoma with people questioning if he could block, yet the Ravens ignored the noise and took him in the 3rd round anyway. That pick turned into the connection that made the passing game dangerous because Andrews runs like a wide receiver and catches everything in his zip code. Until the playoffs. He became the guy the offense looks for on every 3rd down, acting as a safety valve who eventually became a top-tier weapon almost by accident. Georgia actually had 2 running backs in this draft, and the reality is that most teams focus on the wrong one on draft night. New England used a 1st round pick on Sony Michel because they wanted a workhorse, and he helped lead them to the 2018 Super Bowl win. But Cleveland found the real workhorse a few rounds later when Nick Chubb fell to them. He spent years outperforming the big names taken ahead of him, and he piled up massive yardage behind lines that weren't always elite. He was never the kind of back to waste a single carry up until that nasty knee injury with the Steelers, but still had a very respectable career. Indianapolis found another massive win in that same 2nd round when they drafted Darius Leonard, and the payoff for that move happened immediately. He won Defensive Rookie of the Year while leading the entire league in tackles as a first-year player, and he didn't slow down after that. Darius kept stacking up all-pro seasons on top of his rookie year, and he turned into the exact kind of impact player most teams hoped for on day 2. Unfortunately, he became another player who wasn't the same after injuries, but when it comes to his range, he proved that he was one-on-one. Then you have Orlando Brown Jr., who dropped all the way to the 3rd round because his combine was terrible. Baltimore grabbed him and developed a left tackle who improved every single season until he was protecting the blind side at a premier level. He eventually became a Pro Bowl tackle for multiple teams, showing that some players just play much faster than they timed in a 40-yard dash. When you look at all these names together, you start to see the real lesson of this entire class. This wasn't a draft that was just deep at one position or strong in the 1st round, because the talent was everywhere from the top of the board to the middle rounds to the end. Even finding some of the best players late in the 6th and 7th rounds like Jordan Mailata and Foyesade Oluokun. That kind of depth across the board is rare, and it produced stars at every position all at once. The 2018 class proved that the old school prototype the league chased for 20 years wasn't the only way to win games. It was not just about few quarterbacks becoming stars or a running back finally getting his flowers, but about how the talent changed the entire league. We saw that the eye test and the right scheme fit can matter more than where a guy was drafted. So there you have it. Watch this next video if you haven't already, and subscribe if you're new. Thanks for watching.